our Western Cape. I head up our Western Cape region in terms of sales across our entire product portfolio. Today, we're going to focus on Huawei's specifically new Fusion Solar residential solution. I say new, I'll use that as tongue in cheek. It has been around for a couple of months, but we haven't actively taken the time like we are today to present to our key partners and go through the key features, functions, and benefits of the product set itself. How we're going to run the meeting is I'll present. You can see Brian on the right-hand side. He's our Chief Technical Engineer. And if there's anything that you'd like to ask, you're more than welcome to either just unmute at the end of a slide and ask the question or drop it into the comment box and Brian will do his best to assist. We're going to try and focus this session more on sales related, so really just high level key details of the product set itself, so that you can get a decent overview as to whether or not it'll fit into your product set, your offering, and what you might want to take along to market when talking to your customers. So without further ado, we're going to go through a very simplistic agenda. Firstly, just a little bit about Huawei. I'm sure most of you do know them as a company themselves. Sorry, it skipped to, do know them as a company themselves, but just some more detailed information about their business. Then we'll get into the actual product set itself, and then we'll summarize down a few key pointers in terms of what would be the USPs, so unique selling benefits around the Huawei product set. Huawei as a business, quite interestingly, has 194,000 employees internationally. The number that hits me more importantly, and I think that shows their leadership and growth in this market space right now, is that 96,000 of those employees are research and development. So they have approximately 50% of their team focused continually on day-to-day, adding new features, functions, building new product sets, and looking at what will be coming in the future in terms of renewable energy. Unfortunately, the sales revenue figures are a bit behind, so we've only got a closure of H1 2020. But if we look at it from 2013 all the way up to that point, significant increases, a year-on-year of 13.1%, which is pretty massive when you look at where they started. Well, 2013, 9 years ago, in the renewable energy sector. Same conversation in terms of growth. Just giving you more statistics about the actual dollar-based investment in that space. But what I take from this slide as a key point to focus on is that by the end of 2019, they had a total of around 80,000 patents, of which applications had been granted, and above 90% of those were invention patents. That certainly shows that in this space, they are dedicated to leading and dedicated to bringing new features, functions, and product sets to market, to lead in this industry and to lead in this sector, and obviously to help you sell a better quality product to your clientele. And I don't just say a better quality product without saying also easier to deploy, also easier to manage, and also easier for you to maintain, which, as we all know, simplistically for you as a reseller, channel partner, or EPC, means less time on the ground deploying systems and maximizing your profitability within your business. Huawei have recently decided to rename their product, rename their divisional set. They always used to refer to themselves as the Fusion Solar division. They're now starting to talk to a new business unit, which they call Digital Power. And bringing into that Digital Power product set, they've They've put site power facilities, so as we can imagine, they're in the 5G network world. Then we've got data center facilities, smart PV being the product sector that you and I and our customers and our competitors trade in. Then we've got our electric vehicle product set, and then obviously modular product power supply. They've put this into one ecosystem, which they call digital power, and will be managing that from a higher view during the course of the next 12 to 18 months. What makes this very, very exciting for all of us as people playing in this sector is that renewable energy is going to play a very important part in every one of these pieces that we look at on the slide. More importantly, I think the electric vehicle age is on its way. Certainly in Europe and in the US, it's growing in leaps and bounds. But in the Southern African context, I think we're probably a couple of years away. But the data center facilities, certainly in our continent, are growing at an exponential rate. And what we're seeing is fast increasing is those customers are saying we need to find a way to leverage our electricity costs onto something more affordable, obviously that being renewables. And there'll certainly be a big growth in that space in the coming months. So more stats in terms of Huawei as a business. Cumulative 130 gigawatts of global shipments. They're leading the string solution to become absolutely mainstream in the sector. I mean, if we take a look at 2020, we're talking about a 62% market share in string solution inverters, and an estimated by 2022 of around about 80%. That for me is quite significant and shows that the market itself is shifting very quickly in one direction. And I think you'll see when we talk about the next slide that Huawei have certainly positioned themselves with the right product sets to lead in that space. Huawei, today we're going to talk about the residential solution. There's a 2 to 6 kilowatt inverter, single phase, a 3 to 10 kilowatt inverter, three phase. That's tied into an optimized battery backup solution. Just a disclaimer on this right now, Huawei have only certified the 6 kilowatt inverter for sales in our region. There are discussions about bringing the rest possibly to market in the future, but we don't have any timelines on that. So right now, when I get into the slides about the product set itself, the 6 KTL is the only device that will be available. It's fully NRS certified in South Africa and also carries the full City of Cape Town certification. Then in the commercial and industrial space, you'll see there's a 12 to 20 kilowatt inverter listed there. Again, same rules apply. Huawei have decided our South African market possibly, I'm not sure the words isn't ready for it right now, isn't the right thing to say, but probably that the volume of business in that space is just kind of not there. So we'll be focusing on a new 30, a 36 and a 40 KTL. Then we've got the 50 and the 60. For those of you who've been around in the industry for a while, you'll know that inverter very well. We've got the 100 KTL, which has been around now for probably 12 to 16 months, if I can remember correctly. And then, of course, you know that Huawei are starting to focus quite heavily on the utility scale space. They started with a smaller inverter, the 185 KTL, but we are now at the 215, which is a 215 kilowatt inverter. And you'll see on the bottom of that picture, there's a little container with a Huawei logo on that. That is the new product sets that will be coming later on in this year. We're saying Q4, but realistically, we might only see them in Q1, where Huawei are going to be offering a hybrid integrated solution into that utility scale market. The system will include a hybrid inverter that will convert DC to DC, and then you will be able to deliver a containerized battery solution to your client's site. Those will be available in certain capacity sizes as per selected at factory level. Right now, we only know of a 2 megawatt variant that is available, but it's certainly a huge portion of the market that is going to grow in the next 18 to 24 months, where customers are going to start looking for battery solutions. And as we see battery costs start to come off quite drastically, it'll soon become a lot more cost effective and affordable for clients to use batteries as part of their entire PV deployment and cost cutting scenario. So let's jump into the next portion of the agenda, which is the actual residential solution that we wanted to talk about today. So Fusion Solar as a residential PV solution exists of a few components, and we'll go through each one of those separately. But what's key to that is the discussion is to drive an optimal electricity cost, active safety within that environment. And we know certainly that's quite an important talking point for clients in the residential space. And then, of course, a better experience. The better experience is not just a customer-based better experience, end-user-based better experience, but also a better experience for you as the reseller and installer, and making commissioning and deployment of these solutions a lot easier and simpler for you and your teams. As a very basic layout, I'm hoping you can see this slide. It's a little bit small at the top, but you can see we've got on the left-hand side, our panels, which are effectively on the roof of our home. We can have those with optimizers or without optimizers. And yes, this is certainly a new and brave step for Huawei to get into the optimized market. Predominantly, they didn't have optimizers in any of their solutions. But I think what's important to note is that you can have a fully optimized or a partially optimized solution, which makes it quite unique to deliver in certain scenarios. The optimizer itself is a 450 watt capacity, but there is a larger optimizer that will be due probably by the end of this year, early next year. Then we can see that feeds into our 6 KTL inverter. We've got a backup box that's a separate item hanging on the wall. You can see on the left-hand side, the SmartString ESS, that's our lunar battery module. And then we've broken it down between all of the loads, as you would within any scenario within a home, and then full access to the Fusion Solar Smart PV management system via an app, which either you or the customer can have downloaded on their phone to constantly manage and monitor the environment itself. Let's talk about optimal electricity cost and why that's important. It comes very much down to talking to your customer around optimized solutions and being able to balance the load of the daily solar produced power versus the battery storage power that you would use in the evenings, obviously, as we understand when sunlight when the sunlight disappears. So if we take a look at this, we've got a without optimized offering where you've got 85% production on a panel and then 90%, 90%, 90% because of our shading. And I'm sure we all understand that in this industry. But as soon as we optimize, we can get 100% capacity out of the shaded, although the 85% will always remain 85% because it is in that sort of sector where you're not going to get enough coverage. I think the next slide gives you a far better view of what it will look like. So the comparison in terms of energy yields, you're talking about a 10 to 13% increase per day by using an optimized solution versus a non-optimized solution. And I think that's a significant increase in production. And certainly when you're talking to customers, one of the key things they're constantly asking, and even our customers are asking of us is the return on investment. What sort of length are we talking about? How long until I can see that it's paying me back? And with those kind of numbers, I think we now have an opportunity to shorten that return on investment. Therefore, hopefully, more customers will be buying solutions and deploying them to mitigate their energy costs. Also with the Huawei solution, because it's string inverters, we can have longer strings with more panels. There are 2 MPPTs on the 6 KTL, and you can run 1 MPPT with a full string of panels if you wanted to, or you can balance it and have 2 separate strings. Now, what's important here is it's a 200% DC to AC oversizing, and you can run optimized or not optimized, but that's specific to the string. So if a string that you run has optimizers, then every panel on that string must be an optimized string. And if the other one isn't, then obviously the opposite is the case. You therefore don't have that as an optimized string. Quite a nice way to be able to balance the positioning of your modules on homes that do have problems with getting enough solar coverage, both from whether it be external things like trees or shading, or whether it just be in terms of how the roof is positioned and which way the home itself is facing. I'm just going to stop right here and check if anyone had any questions on anything we've gone through so far. No? Everyone fine? Okay, perfect, excellent. Next slide, we introduce the Smart String ESS, which is effectively the Luna 2000 battery solution. It consists of 2 parts. You've got your power module, which is the control unit that controls the charging and discharging of the batteries themselves. And then, of course, your battery modules. Each one of those battery modules are 5 kilowatt per box, and you can stack up to 3 per power module. So that would give you 15 kilowatt hours per stack, and you can parallel 2 stacks to give you a total of 30 kilowatt hours within the environment. What's very important and what's completely different in terms of what the Huawei solution does is it has the ability to be able to mix and match between batteries. So you can imagine a customer possibly starting small with a 5 kilowatt battery on its own, running that possibly for a year or a year and a half, and then coming and sticking another 5 kilowatt in. The power module and the intelligence built into the product set is clever enough to understand that the one battery simplistically has already lost certain amount of its power capacity, and it charges it and treats it completely different to the new battery that's been added into the system, and therefore uses that to balance the load. Also, you can go to a 100% depth of discharge on the Luna battery set itself. So on our next slide, if we take a look, that's pretty much what a standard setup would look like if you had your 2 15 stacks next to each other and then running your inverter outside the building. The inverter itself is an IP65 and the batteries are IP66. So they can be 100% completely mounted outdoors. You can have them mounted at floor level, as you see it there, or if you felt that you wanted to mount them on a wall, that is most certainly possible as well. 50 kgs per battery module, which makes them pretty easy for a 2-person installation. I think typically most times when you go to site, there's 2 guys there working, so certainly can be done. And then you can see the curve in terms of kilowatt capacity versus power requirements and how you can stack your battery solution in line with your inverter solution. Very important to note here, something that we didn't know and something that's certainly not in the presentation, is this isn't just a grid-tied solution. It can run as an off-grid solution. Brian and his technical team have tested that within our workshop. So if you ever have requirements where there's specifically off-grid requirements, this solution does work 100% in that space. Another very unique setup in terms of the Huawei is this lists the 5 KTL, but let's take the 6 KTL as an example because that's the product that's available. It offers full power to the AC, so 5 kilowatts full power to AC for the home during the daytime, and then 5 kilowatts full power to the battery charge. So you're getting full capacity available at all times, which is certainly something different versus what some of the other competitors tend to do in the market. And that allows the customer to get more daytime consumption off their investment, as well as more nighttime consumption off of their investment. The next slide is just a very nice picture of how that layout realistically looks in terms of deployment at a client site. The 6 KTL inverter will take up to 9,000 kilowatt peak panels. So you can install, if you were working on a 450 watt panel, you can install 20 panels on the customer's site, which gives you a fair amount of capacity to then drive not only the home load during the day, but get that battery up to full charge for use in the evenings. And I think what's going to become even more important is as we start to see electric vehicles become more prominent on our roads, clients are certainly going to want as much battery capacity as possible for charging of those vehicles in the evenings when they return from home. Let's talk a little bit about safety. I know that certainly want to make sure that our people working on sites are looked after as much as possible. And Huawei have built in some very important safety features within the product set. The first being electric arc detection, standard within the inverter itself. So what it does is it'll automatically detect if there's a break in a cable or in a connection, and will actively then shut down the inverter to protect it, and will then again restart. And if there is a specific module or cable section that is creating the problem, it will automatically shut that down and then allow the rest to continue as per normal. And I mean, as you can imagine, when we're talking to people about their homes, as it says at the bottom of the slide, what's the harm? The reality is that these things can reach up to 3,000 degrees temperature. And certainly for us in Africa, if we're talking about the summer months, that's something that can start a fire very, very, very easily. The arc protection is driven by AI. So Huawei do a lot of work and effort in terms of artificial intelligence in their product set. The inverter itself, connected to the Fusion Solar network, is constantly learning and understanding what's happening on the customer's site within their environment and how the panels are performing. And then through that, we'll understand specifically what could have gone wrong, and then cut that off through the arc detection, and then send a notification. What's important here specifically is that arc fault protection shutdown is a 0.5 seconds. That is very quick by industry standards. And the next slide, in fact, if I switch across, you'll see it's been tested, approved, and stamped by the TUV. So it's in line with European standards to ensure that protection is correct, fast enough, and is certainly making sure that your customer site is safe at all times. When I skip to the next slide, it should be a video, so I hope it plays. What it shows you is the difference between a PV installation that doesn't have the RFI protection, and a site that does with the Huawei AI Boost installed. So we can see on the left, it's continuing to go and burn. And you see on the right, the Huawei solution, the second that it was detected, it automatically cut itself off, which is, I couldn't even see it, but 0.5 seconds is very, very quick. To talk more about safety, optimizers certainly also make installations a lot more safer, not just for the customer, but also for staff that need to go and do maintenance, checks, fault detection, anything in that space. With an optimizer, the optimizer then makes sure that it's putting out 0 volts at that point when the system shuts down. So very, very important for safety in terms of staff as well as clients in that space. The other thing that's very nice in terms of the fault protection is that using the Fusion Solar app, you can absolutely pinpoint precisely where the problem is. The app will show you which module has gone faulty or has a problem or has a cable issue, as it would have been, and can save up to 80% in terms of on-site detection. Typically, if we didn't have this kind of technology, the guy would have to get up on the roof, take a look at every module, check every plug, check every cable, and that's obviously very time consuming and very cost effective. Very costly. I think we're starting to realize in our market that residential systems are growing at an exponential rate, not just because we have ESCOM and we have load shedding continually coming at us on a weekly basis, but I think that people are starting to try to be a little bit better corporate citizens, if I could put it that way, and are certainly looking at ways to invest in renewable energies and contribute to the environment. So definitely important that with this growth in the market, you can only grow your teams to a certain extent, and therefore the less time you can spend with operational issues on site with clients, the better it is for you and your business. Then in terms of the battery and the battery protection, there is a 3-layer protection in place. And that starts at the cell itself and all the way up to the battery module at the top. It's lithium iron phosphate cells, which we know are certainly very safe and very stable in that environment. And then we have control over a pack level of each battery to ensure that they are stable and looked after. Also, all cooling is done through convection, so it's self-sustaining and looks after itself without any interference from both the client or you as the installer or reseller. The most important thing about obviously selling these products is that we want to have battery backup. So as we saw on one of the earlier slides, if you've got the battery box, the backup box installed, which we pretty much sell as a mandatory accessory with the deployment, as soon as the system shuts down, it'll automatically switch across to the emergency critical load and will then back up whatever needs to be backed up in that house, pretty much as any stock standard PV installation that you've probably done before. But what's important to note here is that there is a Huawei specific backup box that is part of the incorporated solution. I see there's a few chats going on. I don't know if anyone wants to ask any questions off mic. I see Brian's answering them, but I thought I'd just take 2 seconds to ask. We all good? Okay, perfect, excellent. Now we move on to better experience. For me, this is better experience for the end user. Obviously, I like to call this the fluff, little bit of marketing stuff, but in reality, if we take a look at the battery design itself, it's very good looking, very sleek, very neat, very easy to deploy. The floor standing opportunity there is nice. We know people tend to like to put them in their garages or hide them away from anyone to see them. But the reality is, if we start to see these getting deployed in complexes at a large scale, and your scullery happens to be the only space that you have, I don't think this battery solution would look ugly standing against the wall next to a washing machine or a tumble dryer, if you had to ask my personal opinion. The inverter itself as well, also very small, very easy to hang up on the wall, looks tidy, very, very neat, and very simplistic to get your cabling and things attached to. What's very important about the Huawei solution is that it's what I like to call an ecosystem. So effectively, everything is a plug and play, and then everything comes together in a central space. So the inverters are designed to work with the batteries. Batteries will only work with the Huawei inverters. Same goes with the optimizers. But what's more important also is that once you link that to the Fusion Solar app, you have one service window through Huawei to be able to control and look after the customer's environment. And that certainly for me is the big kicker. I know that in the residential space, it's certainly one of the areas where there's a lot of challenges in terms of being able to understand what's happening with the client system, why it's not working. I think a lot of the guys tell me if Eskom flicks the switch, they might as well switch their phone off because customers are on their case 24/7 trying to understand what, why, and how come has my system gone down, and I don't understand. Uh, the Huawei inverters don't only work with your standard connectivity, but you can put a smart 4G dongle on, and that would allow you then in times of electrical disconnect to still be able to log on to the inverter and understand precisely what's happening in the customer's environment. Certainly in some cases, if the Wi-Fi is down and now we have our solar situation being down, we can't access and try and troubleshoot. So with the 4G integrated, you then have the opportunity of being able to still dial into that environment and understand exactly what's taking place. As I said, auto detection and all system devices. You've got your app. The second you set it up and you link it to the inverter itself, you have a full view of everything that is within the environment. I would almost call it a zero-touch provisioning. The inverter itself, we'll actually get to that in a few slides down, but it's nice to talk about it even on this slide. The inverter itself has no buttons. It has no control. You cannot change anything on the inverter itself, and that is specifically to ensure longevity and reliability, because those are things that tend to go faulty and do break. Therefore, everything is easily set up through the app itself. Not just the inverter and the batteries, but also you can do module auto mapping. So as you are deploying the modules, you've got a barcode on the template. You simply scan those barcodes as you lay out those modules. And the second that you're finished, it automatically sets up that module picture on the customer site that you've set on the app. And that is certainly a very unique feature and makes it a lot easier to deploy the solution. I spoke about the 4G dongle. There are actually two dongles. There's a WLAN FE dongle, which then gives you connectivity to the Wi-Fi environment, and the second one being 4G. For me, I think in our environment, given that when Eskom flicks a switch, we typically can lose all power. Unless you work with a customer to put some sort of backup on Wi-Fi, I mean certainly that's an option. Then at least you have access and control to see what's going on. But the 4G dongle is not an expensive item, and certainly provides you connectivity in those times when you need to assist your customer as best as possible. I spoke earlier, and it's very important. No fuses, no switches, no LCDs. The inverter is completely touch-free. That's very important. Certainly is one of the key reasons why Huawei have a very low failure rate in terms of their product set, currently sitting at 99.996% availability. So that's a 0.5% failure rate on inverters across their entire range. So we're not just talking about the residential space. This actually covers from residential all the way up to utility scale environments. We realistically and very rarely have major inverter faultages. We tend to find a lot of the times it's installation error or fault on site that has caused something to happen to the inverter itself. I mean, I'd like to take this opportunity when I mention that to say that Brian and his team are available to train, skill, assist, back you up in terms of these installations. Obviously, we understand not everyone has always had access to Huawei or has certainly only had access to other product sets. If you are ready to deploy one of these systems, you are more than welcome to book a time slot with Brian and his team, and they will get you up to speed in terms of how to install these inverters and realistically how easy it is to deploy and commission them. And then you certainly won't have any problems. Another thing that helps with reliability is that it's natural cooling. So the residential range of products, in fact, all of the products up to the 100 kTL all run on natural cooling. So there are no moving parts, no fans, nothing that needs to be serviced or cleaned or that can go faulty on the customer site. Certainly important when we go back to what I mentioned earlier. These things can be deployed in multiple areas and spaces within a home. And I've certainly heard complaints about some competitor products making some very large fan noises in their environments. This certainly wouldn't be the case. Just a little bit of a picture of how the app itself works and what you would see. So you've got a visible power flow, which is that first little phone picture, shows you what's coming through from your PV, what you're delivering to your load, what you're delivering to your batteries. Then you've got a layout of your panels themselves and how they are reacting. And then you've got a full energy management dashboard, which will give you statistical analysis around yield, revenue charts, all of those kind of informations. That's available to you as the partner, but also available to the customer themselves. I certainly know a lot of customers are very interested in trying to see how much they're generating every day, and it does become quite an exciting thing for them to keep their eyes on a day-to-day basis. In terms of a summary, I think it's important we'll go through 9 features of the solution, which were in all of the presentation slides that we've gone through, which leads to showing that the Huawei residential solution certainly is stepping up to be a leader in this space. The first thing is 30% more energy by using the optimizers in the environment. Please take note, as I mentioned earlier, you can have partially optimized environments using the 2 strings. So one string would need to be fully optimized. The second string certainly doesn't need to be optimized. Then you've got the string ESS, the battery itself, the lunar module with multiple battery packs, which are then controlled by the power module at the top of the battery stack. Then it's 2 times power ready. In other words, we can deliver 5 kilowatts of power to the home during the daytime off our PV and 5 kilowatts to the battery charge. So we can ensure that we are using the maximum that we can to cover both uses, home and battery charge. Then we've got the AI, artificial intelligence powered active arc protection. The inverter is constantly learning the environment and making sure that it understands how it should and shouldn't be operating. And when it detects a fault, we'll cut that down, as we've said, within 0.5 seconds, 0.5 milliseconds, and ensure that there's protection for the home, and then send an alert to your O&M team, who will automatically then know exactly where the fault lies and can assist in sorting that out. Naught voltage at module level when you shut down, when using an optimized solution. You've got the pinpoint arc fault protection, which I discussed earlier. Then it's kind of one fits all solution. When we talk about that, it's multiple ways of being able to deploy. The customer can have an inverter without optimizers, an inverter with optimizers. Can have an inverter with 4G, inverter without 4G. Can have one battery, two batteries, three batteries, and then two stacks, 6 batteries. So there's multiple choices for the customer in terms of size and capacity that they might require for their environment. We've got the module auto mapping, which makes it very easy to deploy and commission. And then everything is touch-free. So it's natural cooling, no fans, no movable parts, which certainly makes it a lot easier to manage in terms of any issues going wrong, and certainly make sure that the customer has a fault-free installation, if I can put it that way. So to break it down very simplistically, kind of product for product, we've got what's referred to as a smart energy center. Realistically is an inverter. As I've mentioned before, we will, in this country right now, be offering the 6 KTL L1. It's a single phase inverter. There are other options in the 3-phase. You can see on the right-hand side, there's a 3 to 10 KTL. That device, as I've said, we are still waiting to hear whether or not Huawei will certify it for our local consumption, and dates and timelines on that have certainly not been shared with us. Then we've got the lunar module. Sounds like we're going to space, which is effectively the battery setup. You've got a power module, which is a separate box, and then you can buy your 5 kilowatt sections of battery to add to your battery bank. We've got our optimizer, currently at 450 watts max, but there is a larger capacity optimizer expected Q4 this year. I don't have defined details. Please don't quote me because sometimes these things can change, but we have been given an indication that we could be looking at one that will go anything up to 550, possibly 600 watts, because we know that panels are certainly starting to grow in capacity. So there's going to be a need for an optimizer to take those size panels. Then we've got our backup box, which ensures when our load is lost through Eskom that we can then offer full backup into the environment. We've got our smart dongles, which is a WLAN FE dongle, and then the smart 4G dongle, whichever one you feel would be the right for the way you want to run your business and possibly how the customer would like you to interact with them. Huawei does also have a smart power sensor. So effectively, this is your power meter that controls feedback into the grid. I think you'll be pleasantly surprised when you take a look at the cost of that device versus what the market currently has to offer. It's very cost effective. We're actually finding clients buying it for other deployments, not necessarily in residential space, but it'll only go up to a maximum of 170 kilowatt peak. So that's quite important to keep in mind. Then we've got the app, Fusion Solar app, free download for commissioning, installing, as well as for your client to be able to take a look at what's going on in his environment. And then you've got Fusion Solar in the cloud, which is your monitoring portal. Every EPC or reseller, as in our customers, you would be able to open an account on there. You would become the owner of your multiple sites that you would set up below that. and you can, from that portal, view, monitor, and control anything that you would need to within your Huawei installed base. And then just in closing, if you can scan that little QR code, there's a great community space that Huawei have available where you can get information on solar technology itself. There's free marketing documentation there where you can download PDFs, you can add your own content, you can send them out to your customers. And then what will be coming is kind of rewards programs for Huawei resellers specifically, where they'll start to do training and certifications. So you can become a fully certified Huawei reseller, and then possibly rewards from purchasing, kickbacks, and rebates. But those things are sort of slowly in the mix and aren't right now available. For me, expectation probably by the end of the year. But right now, there's lots of tools and lots of information that you can go and get there. So please go get on there. There's forums, you can ask questions. Very, very helpful space to be. I hope that kind of covered everything as well as it possibly could. I really just wanted to give you what I like to call the helicopter high-level sales view of what the solution is. We certainly would be interested in talking to anyone face to face, or whether it be on a telephone call, if you want to get into a more deep dive about the product as well as the costs associated with each one of the items. You can reach out to any one of your account managers and they will gladly assist you where best as possible. I'll open the floor now to any direct questions that possibly haven't been answered by Brian and the team. I can't necessarily see the chat box while I'm presenting,